Dr. Stanley I. Wolf, and I'm a physician, and my rank was at the Chosin Reservoir was Lieutenant JG in the U.S. Navy Reserve. But we were surrounded by 125,000 Chinese, and there was no way to evacuate them except by plane. And we had orders that anybody who could ride shotgun, that means to the side of the driver, even if he couldn't walk, he could not be evacuated. And as a result, we had to keep guys in the line, to keep guys at our aid station who couldn't walk, but they could stop a bullet. And they had to stay. And could they have been evacuated, maybe they would have saved their feet or maybe saved their lives. But the problem we had with so many casualties was that some of them, let's say you had a kid with half his head shot away, and we have another one with a sucking chest wound. And this kid with a sucking chest wound, you're an anesthetist, you know, if they could get to Japan, they could take care of that and block that off and save their life. This kid, we didn't know whether he could be saved or not, so we kept him, and we sent this one. And I've lived with that all my life, that had this kid gotten out, he might have been saved too, but we made decisions. And I was fortunate enough to have another doctor with me in the aid station who had been in World War II, and after he got out back, he was a board-eligible urologist. He was a surgeon. Should not have been in an Italian aid station. He should have been in a hospital company. But I had his surgical judgment to help make those decisions, which I was very grateful for that. As far as the Marines would go, we had multiple gunshot and shrapnel wounds. The problem was operating at 20, 30, 40 below zero. They didn't know about wind chill factor at that time, so the wind chill factor may have been 60 or 70 below zero, it's estimated. But the corpsmen, who were the bravest of the brave, they'd have to take their gloves off to take care of wounded, so they would have frostbite. Syrettes of morphine froze, they'd put them in their mouth to have to thaw them out to get them to use that. And we had plasma. You know, after World War II, they had demobilized, and they didn't have it. We had plasma dated 1947, and we called up and said, we need some fresh plasma. That's all you got, use it. So a lot of guys got plasma in 1947, and as far as we know, it worked. So, but that had to be thawed out also. It couldn't be used otherwise. But they had given us equipment called a shoe pack. And a shoe pack boot was well thought out. Whoever thought of this was thought to be a genius, I guess, but the man had a 3/4 inch felt inner sole which would absorb perspiration. At night he would take his boot off, take this inner sole, put it next to his body so the body heat would evaporate his perspiration, take the warm, dry one, put it back in the boot, powder his feet, put on warm, dry socks, and go forth to liberate the world. Well, these guys, many of the troops they had not many, but some were bayoneted in their sleeping bags. So the word got around about that. They would not get into sleeping bags anymore, so they used a sleeping bag like a blanket, and they would not at 20 below zero take their boots off. The inner sole stayed in for 3 or 4 days, and it froze. So they had a layer of ice under their feet. If they took their boot off, they couldn't get it back on again. Their feet swelled, and it was like raw meat. And they would come hopping into the aid station on one foot because they couldn't walk on the other foot, and we would take their boots off gingerly, because if you took it off too fast, their toes came with it. And anyway, they had raw meat. It was like bleeding their feet, and we could not evacuate these guys. We had orders that even though they couldn't walk, they wouldn't take a place on these planes because we had so many wounded, including the Army units, needing the space on the planes, and these were desperately injured people. So this was the experience I had at the Chosin Reservoir. And then we marched from Hagaruri back, and every jeep space was taken with a wounded person, so I walked with the Marines just like everybody else, and subject to the same cold weather, and my feet had blisters on them too with the cold weather, and I'm 80% disabled from the effects of the long-term effects of cold injury, which that's another story. We had trouble getting the veterans to recognize the long-term effects of cold injury, even though the Army did all the research on it. That one branch of the Army of the government doesn't talk to another. Anyway, we got back to Hungnam, got on board ships, and we were a grungy group of guys, I have to tell you, they got back to Busan in South Korea, and at that point I was transferred back to collecting to a D medical company. And for a short time I was the psychiatrist for the 1st Marine Division, because there was a commander, McMullen, who was supposed to come in, who was a psychiatrist, and he hadn't arrived, and they said, if any of you had any psychiatry training. And at Georgetown they had given us some psychiatry training, and I had an internship at Pittsburgh, and I'd spent a month at the Western State Psychiatric Hospital. So I felt comfortable taking a complete history, and I said, well, I've had some, okay, you're it. Well, here comes a Marine that comes in, that he had shot a houseboy, a Korean houseboy, and he had been a prisoner of war in World War II, and the guards were all Koreans, and he did not distinguish between a North or a South Korean. As far as he was concerned, they were the meanest of the mean, and this kid gave him some lip, he killed him. And he comes in and he admits it. He said, I don't take any lip from any Korean, and this one gave me lip, I killed him. So I have to take this history down, and I wrote it all up, and we sent him out to an Army unit where they had a legitimate psychiatrist too, and meantime I was transferred back to the States, where I was sent up to Staten Island Naval Hospital, where I spent a couple months, and I was discharged from there.